My problem statement is that why does welfare tourism divide the EU, and what are the future prospects of a European social model? To that I have four problems. What is welfare tourism, and how and why is it relevant? Why are some welfare regimes more attractive than others when it comes to EU mobility? What are the advantages and disadvantages of EU mobility / free movement of labor and people, and should the EU move towards a European social model? So I'll start with problem one. What is welfare tourism, and how and why is it relevant? Welfare tourism is defined as the idea that some people from poor EU member states move to richer member states to enjoy the benefits of these countries rather than going there to work. And the phenomena of welfare tourism is caused by the idea of free movement within the EU, which is a result of the Single European Market Act from 1986 and includes free movement of money, goods, and all EU citizens. As it can be seen in Appendix 1, which is the article is UK's Cameron right to worry about welfare tourism in the EU, the British Prime Minister David Cameron is worried that welfare tourism will harm Britain as it will put a strain on vital local services and is burdening the host country's social welfare regimes. And he questions one of the basic principles behind the EU, the principle of free movement. Cameron's concern is spreading to other countries and is thereby threatening the future of the EU since it can create a divide within the Union. And this concern is due to the country's position in the business cycle, because the states within the Union are forced to lead different fiscal policies as a result of their position within the business cycle. Some lead expansive fiscal policies and some lead contractive fiscal policies, all depending on the individual country's economic situation. As a result of the state's economic status, some countries are more attractive for welfare tourists due to generous welfare states. Problem two is why are some welfare countries more attractive than others when it comes to EU mobility? Appendix 6 is from The Economist and emphasizes the next supermodel in terms of welfare states as being found in the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. And these countries are doing very well due to economic competitiveness, social health, and happiness. At the same time, the Nordic countries have avoided both Southern Europe's economic sclerosis and America's extreme inequality. And this can be explained by the fact that the Nordics managed to help the debt crisis in the 1990s. It is stated that the Nordics have changed course mainly to the right and that this has affected the country's current situation in a rather positive way. For example, Sweden's cut in public spending caused that the share of GDP has dropped by around 18 percentage points, which is lower than France's and soon Britain's. Also, taxes have been cut in Sweden. The corporate tax is 22%, whereas America's is far lower. It appears that the Nordics have focused on stabilizing the economy through tax cuttings and lowering public spending. And the Nordic countries have had a pragmatic and similar approach to public services, but however, despite the fact that the Nordics' methods tend to consider the political right, the Nordics also offer something for the progressive left by proving that it is possible to combine competitive capitalism with a large state. Appendix 2 is a figure from Debating Europe, which compares different European states based on different parameters. The figure e.g. compares the states in terms of unemployment benefit and minimum wage. There are high unemployment benefits in some countries, for example, Belgium, which is 3.79% of GDP, Denmark is 2.43% of GDP, and low employment benefits in other countries such as Poland with 0.42% of GDP. And this explains why Denmark and Belgium are more attractive welfare regimes for Poland, because they can come to Denmark and Belgium and benefit from the welfare system in those countries. Another example is in terms of minimum wages. The figure shows that Luxembourg has the highest minimum wage in the EU with 1,874.19 euro per month. This can explain why, for example, Romanians will come to Luxembourg to work for a higher minimum wage, because in Romania the minimum wage is 157.50 euro per month. And these numbers show that welfare regimes are more attractive for welfare tourists that some welfare regimes are more attractive for welfare tourists than others. And this can be explained by the fact that countries such as Denmark, Belgium, and Luxembourg have a more generous welfare regime. And furthermore, Appendix 4 is a video with the Danish position about Messerschmidt commenting on the ECG, the European Court of Justice, verdict limiting the possibility to reserve social benefits welfare for Danish citizens. And Messerschmidt provides an example of how Poland can actually benefit from being on welfare in Denmark. He says that statistics show that 9 out of 10 from Poland would benefit more from being on welfare in Denmark than they would on working full-time in Poland. And then problem 3 is my discussion. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of EU mobility, and should EU move towards a European social model. First of all, Appendix 3 is an article called Impact of Mobile EU Citizens on National Security, Social Security Systems, published on Europe.eu. The Commission supports free movement of people. I quote, "The Commission remains committed to ensuring that EU citizens that would like to work in another EU country also can do so without facing discrimination or obstacles. The Commission recognizes that there can be regional or local problems created by a large sudden influx of people from other EU countries into a particular geographical area. This connects to problem 2, that some countries are more attractive than others, and the Commission is actually ready to engage with these particular member states to provide exact numbers to help them. Thereby, the Commission generally sees EU mobility as an advantage, and the article actually provides exact numbers to support the claim. That economically non-active EU mobile citizens account for a very small share of beneficiaries. In Austria, Bulgaria, Estonia, Greece, Malta, and Portugal, the welfare tourist represents less than 1% of all beneficiaries of EU nationality. And in Germany, Finland, the Netherlands, and Sweden, the number is between 1% and 5%. And these numbers contribute to saying that welfare tourism is not that big of a problem. And the reason why the percentage of welfare tourists within all beneficiaries is higher in the last 5 countries mentioned could be that these countries have a better economy. Especially Finland and Sweden are known for a generous welfare system. The article also proposes one main argument proving an advantage of EU mobility, and the argument is a result of latest studies, and I quote, "Migrant workers from other member states usually pay more into host country budgets and taxes and social security than they receive in benefits because they tend to be younger and more economically active than the host country's own workforce, and this claim functions as the main argument for EU mobility as being an advantage for both the host country and foreign workers." Nevertheless, the British Prime Minister David Cameron in Appendix 1 is opposing the idea of free movement of people since he worries that it will bring welfare tourists. But the reason why David Cameron is so much against the idea of free movement of labor could be explained by domestic politics, and therefore it's possible that he has decided to hold back information in order to gain voters, because if he only presents the negative information and thereby criticizes the EU, it can benefit his political position in the UK, and therefore his critique could be a link in domestic politics. This is also elaborated in Appendix 6, which says that Cameron is holding back, Appendix 7, that says that Cameron is holding back information. The Vice President of the Commission, Viviane Reding, also claims that Cameron has a secret thought with his critique. I quote, "The government was whipping up EU immigration scares to distract people from the UK's real problem." And this supports the idea that Cameron has actually held back information for domestic related reasons. The Nordic welfare model has its advantages due to generous welfare regimes, but however there are still some disadvantages. Despite the fact that Sweden has had tax cuts, the level of taxation still encourages entrepreneurs to move abroad. This has caused young Swedes to move to Britain, and this is the pressure that has caused governments to cut spending due to growing global competition, and the competition will cause more change in the future. However, the article praises the Nordic welfare system. This is not in terms of ideology, but in terms of the Nordic countries' ability to adapt to the economic situation, and therefore it's argued, I quote, The state is popular not because it is big, but because it works. It's argued that the world will be studying the Nordic welfare model for years to come. And this can be put into perspective with Appendix 5, where the article emphasizes that Helle Thorning-Schmidt alienated her center-left voters when she started cutting one of Europe's most generous welfare systems after her election, which is the Danish system. The original idea behind a European social model was the notion of a common European approach to social issues with focus on interventionist states, welfare, workers' rights, and efforts to address inequality. But this is not currently a possibility since the economies of the countries within the EU are in different stages of the business cycle. This means that some economies are recovering while others are still in recession. This means that different countries have led different fiscal policies. Some might lead a more contractive fiscal policy, while others lead a more expansive fiscal policy. It all depends on which stage in the business cycle the country is in, and therefore it can be hard to find one welfare model that fit all countries. Due to these differences, there are also cultural differences. But nevertheless, if a European social model was to be implemented, it will create disturbances. But if the main goal is to implement one common model, then the Nordic welfare model would be to prefer. Thereby, I can conclude that welfare tourism does not divide the EU, since it is only a very low percentage of foreign people in other EU member states that take advantage of the welfare regimes, which the numbers proved before. The European social model doesn't have good prospects for a European social model due to these big economic and cultural differences. But if the main goal was to implement one, then it would be the Nordic welfare model that would work best, since it has so many advantages.